Once you've made your mortise, you need to make a block that matches your mortise, basically. Here I've sort of tweaked it until it fits. I don't want to push it down all the way. You want it to be snug, but not very difficult to get down there. So I know that this is about where I want it because I can push it into place fairly easily, but I know I'm not going to easily be able to pull it back out. So now I'm going to want to draw what this neck looks like, just so I know when I'm drilling my 3 pins, indexing pins, that I'm getting them into the neck, not into the body of the guitar. So I'm going to draw out the tenon on here. Half-inch depth tenon. There we go. Alright, so I know I want to stay within this area. When I'm drilling my 3 indexing pins, the main reason for the indexing pins is because I want to be able to take this neck off the body to glue this onto the neck so that it doesn't get glued onto the body by accident. Indexing pins will allow me to glue it in place without it being, crooked or cockeyed. So I can now drill, and obviously with this neck attachment method, I can't drill an indexing pin right where the heel is going to be because there's an aluminum rod there. So I'm going to put 2, one on either side of the rod, and then one into the tenon. And they aren't going deep. Really, it's just enough for the 1/4-inch wooden dowels to just sink themselves into the wood. Also, you don't want to make the wooden dowels go too deep because you're going to be carving away the heel. If you're making a stiletto-shaped heel, then there's actually a carve away below this, right? So if your dowel sticks out, then you're going to carve into the dowel and it's going to show up. So obviously you can actually angle the dowels a little bit inwards to prevent that from happening. So yeah, I am ready to drill my indexing holes. This block hasn't been thinned down to the final thickness yet. It's going to stick up. See how it's sticking up a little bit there? Which is fine. I'm going to glue it in place, bolt it all back together, and then I can sand it down to flush with the neck and the body. Going in. I want to make sure it's really well seated because that's where it's going to live. Make sure it's down everywhere. Okay, so now I can drill those. I use wooden dowels because then I can just sand them down, shave them down. 1/4-inch wooden dowels, so I'm going to drill some 1/4-inch holes, just 5 millimeters or so into the neck below it. So I've got 12, about 13 millimeters in this block, and then another 5 millimeters, so 18. Now I can put a depth stop, not a depth stop, but a piece of tape where I want to stop. So I'm going 18 millimeters, go about there. This isn't super critical, obviously, it's just to know I've got enough depth to line things up. Yeah, so about 13 millimeters block, and then about 5 or so. Yeah. So now I'm going to go three holes. There's also a bolt going in here too, so you have to be careful with your depth of this that you're not going to hit that bolt. Should fit in there just right. I'll cut them a bit long at first just so I've got something to hold on to. Theoretically, you could do 2 pins, but I always do 3 just to be safe, in case one's a little bit, the hole widened for some reason or whatever. The extra pin's not going to make a difference, so yeah, 3 is nice to be safe. So now I can take this apart. It can be a little tricky to take it apart, but I'm just going to unbolt this and then I can wiggle this apart basically. Be able to pull it apart now. There we go. So that should, if I did everything right, should be pretty solid in here once I put these pins in. And this will be clamped down, so yeah, looks good. So now I can glue this on, and I'll do the glue cleanup around here so that it stays out of the joint. But basically, I can now glue this on. Extra is better than not enough when it comes to glue. Any extra is just going to squeeze out, so might make a bit more of a mess, but at least I know there's glue everywhere. There we go. Oh shoot, I should have put some glue in there first. I often, once this is all said and done and I flush up these dowels, I'll put a bit of super glue in, solidify those dowels a bit. There we go, that one's in. And my camera died, so I'm just jumping over to this other neck, which is at the same stage. If you sort of spin the dowels as they're going in, you'll get glue on it everywhere. Okay, so now I can put a clamp on here, just to push it all down, make sure it's tight against. I'm going to sneak another clamp onto here just so that I can. There we go. Now it's cleanup time. There's a bit of a mess in there right now, but that means there's glue everywhere, so that's good. I want to make sure to clean this up really well because this is basically everywhere in this joint is wood-to-wood contact except for the end of the tenon, so you don't want any glue chunks in the way. So wait for that to dry, and then we're on to the next step. Next is to make this block flush with the neck and the body. So One way I've found works really well without, so that you don't sand or plane around this block or affect the body or the neck, is if you cover the surrounding area with masking tape. That often just gives you a bit of a buffer, so you're not. And actually the sandpaper doesn't seem to really sand through the tape, it just kind of rides over top. So you may have noticed I like to take some of the tackiness off the tape, especially with a redwood top or something soft grained like that. That way there's less chance of it pulling up fibers. So same, there's just enough oil and dust on my hands that it'll remove some of the tackiness. Actually, I'm going to add another couple rows of tape on either side, just a bit of a wider protection zone. Okay, so now I can actually start planing and sanding. Oftentimes mahogany doesn't plane very well, so we'll see if this works. If not, I'll have to sand it down. Start with the coarse grit. Some of the tape off there. I'm going to replace that and then continue. Actually, I'll probably switch over to the sandpaper now because I'm getting pretty close. Okay, I'm getting fairly close now. Have to be cautious that my block is seated really tightly in there. So it looks like there's a ever so slight wiggle. I'm going to be bolting this down, so I definitely don't want to sand it so that there's a space underneath, and then once the fingerboard's on, clamp it down, because it could actually separate the fingerboard from this block. So now I'm going to actually work on putting the insert in here and then clamp it down. Then I can finish sanding this flush. So I like to use a T-nut going in from the top side, the fingerboard side of this insert, and it works really well for me. One thing to consider is if your truss rod access is from the sound hole, then one insert in the middle is obviously going to get in the way. So you would have to go with two inserts, one on either side. And then these are probably too big to do that with. So you'd have to go with a different kind of insert. But I've found this works really well for me. It's simple, just one bolt through this block and then it holds everything down. I don't like to put it too close to the tip because I'm trying to keep this whole area down. So I like to sort of center it in the unsupported area. This part of the neck is going to be held down with the bolts, but not held down. It's just aligned with the bolts. So this would actually help it to stay in place too. So centering it in this block will pull this entire block down against the top, which will work perfectly as long as this block is flush with the top. So as long as I make that flush, as soon as this bolt pulls this down into the pocket, it's going to be flush with the top. So one bolt works great. One consideration you don't want, the only thing you have to be careful about is if your bolt head is going to hit your heel block that comes in here. Most oftentimes it's not a problem, but it's something to be cautious of, especially if you have a shorter block here, or the distance between the you know, the end of the heel block and the end of this block is smaller. So I'm going to put it about, there. I think that looks about right. There. Okay, so now I want to countersink this so that this part of the bolt goes down flush to where this is going to be sanded. So I'm going to countersink it a bit extra than what this is. So that's good. I'm definitely not going to sand that much more off of this, so I'm not going to have to sand this insert. One thing I've found on one of my first necks I did like this, these spikes really wanted to split this block, so I have to drill little holes for these individual spikes. And then the hole for this center bolt, I used to make it the width of this insert through this block, and then a 1/4 inch underneath because that's the width of the bolt. But I was having trouble with that hole not lining up with the insert, and almost always had to widen it anyways. So as long as this block is really tight into this pocket, there's no reason why a wider hole through this heel block extension is going to be an issue. So I'm just going to drill this width of hole all the way through into the guitar. And of course, I'll have to make sure to support the inside with something. The hardwood block's better. Now I have to mark these 4 points, and you can do that by just pushing down on it. They'll make little indentations. I usually drill them the width of these points just so that they don't pry open or pry apart the grain, and obviously just the depth of that so I don't have to go through this block. There we go. So it turns out to be kind of a fancy hole. That's pretty much bang on. I can now clamp it in and not worry about anything splitting. Of course, a clamp works great in this situation because the round piece is the perfect size to push that insert in. A bolt needs to be cut. I'm just gonna thread it through and then mark it where it needs to be cut. And then, there we go. For whatever reason, getting an Allen wrench on this bolt is very difficult. At least for me it is. I can actually suck that insert down with this bolt. There, so that's nice and tight. I can now mark where that needs to be cut. There we have it. Now I can cut that. This ends up being a pretty short bolt, which is kind of nice. It adds a bit less mass to the whole system. There we go. So that's nice and tight. You'll notice that bolt is inset a bit. That's good because you do not, in any circumstances, want it to stick out past this insert, because that's going to push on the fingerboard and could actually pop your fingerboard off of your block. But yeah, make sure it's depressed a little bit into this cavity. Now that I have this bolted together really snugly, I can finish sanding this block flush. So I'm going to take this tape off now because I'm flush with the tape. The tape is quite, actually I'll go a little bit more here. And then I can take the tape off and do the final sanding so that it's flush with everything, and then it's the transition's perfect. And then I can work on truss rods, carbon fiber rods, and the rest of the joint. I use this tape protection method a lot, actually, because as you can tell, it works really well. It protects everything around what you're sanding, so that you don't start sanding into it and change the shape of things. But you can see I've started sanding into the tape, and the tape gets a little bit chewed up, but it doesn't go through the tape, so it's still protecting the wood underneath. Almost there. There's still a bit of a lip everywhere. You can check, make sure you've gone flush everywhere once you think you're there. Yeah, that's good to me. So I'm good to move on to the next step. I'm probably gonna doing the final sanding on this top just quickly, also because this is gonna come down a little bit more too. Guess I should have done that before, but it's pretty much flush. Okay, so I'll do the final sanding right now once this is together. I don't have to worry about this being in the way. And then continue on the rest. Carbon fiber rods are in. Truss rod slot is routed and ready for the truss rod. I made my head so it's thinned down. I've got the tuner holes drilled. I also have some wooden blocks glued to align where the fingerboard is supposed to go. So one nice little trick when you're marking the center line on ebony like this on a fingerboard is put a piece of tape on it and then you can see your line. So I've done that, and then lined it up with the center line of the top, and now I'm ready to glue the fingerboard on, but I have to be careful because I don't want to get glue in these threads or get glue, yeah, basically anywhere in the threads. So if you put a piece of, I use electrical tape because it's black, and you'll see it at the bottom of this hole when you once your fingerboard's glued on. So I'm going to glue a little piece on there. There, a nice terrible circle, but it doesn't matter as long as it covers that hole. And then I'm going to take the bolt that is supposed to go in here and just put it up so that the glue doesn't make that tape dip down. So I can see, there we go. And you just have to make sure that your bolt isn't sticking up above this surface, obviously, because you want your fingerboard to be flat there. There, so I am ready to glue my fingerboard. I'm going to go ahead and do that. This one is I'm using an LMI truss rod, so I'm going to actually be sliding the cleaner tool in there and then putting the truss rod in after. So it'll be a little bit different than my usual process, but there we go. So I can glue this on, and then my neck is ready to be carved and my neck joint is completely done. So yeah, one nice thing about this neck joint is if you get your jigs to be perfectly accurate, you don't have to hollow out these cheeks. This whole area is wood-to-wood contact on the guitar body. So once you have it set up, I haven't had to chisel out this area in a number of guitars now, and I don't know if there's any sound difference, but I know it's really nice not to have to chisel that out and floss the cheeks of the heel to make it match the guitar body, because they match perfectly already. So yeah, I'm going to glue that. thanks for watching. If you had any questions, just put them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. And if, as I said before, this is just the way I've sort of approached this neck joint, and I found it works really well. And if you have your own twist on it, actually I'd like to hear about it. Maybe you have something that would work a bit better. Just let me know in the comments, and I'd love to hear from you.